everybody. This is Drunk Art History with Lisa. Just to let you guys know, I've been sick all week, so I sound really nasally, and it's kind of awkward. But that's okay, because I'm drunk, so I'm not gonna notice. I'm gonna try to talk clear. It's kind of hard for me to talk clear. Anyways, quick disclaimer, like last time, these opinions are my own, so please don't get butthurt over them, because they're mine, and mine alone. And you might like them, but yeah, okay. Anyways, today's, topic that we're going to be talking about is Gothic cathedrals, or, well, it's supposed to be the Gothic period of art, but I don't really give a shit about the other period stuff. So we're just going to talk about cathedrals because they're fucking awesome. And because, well, that's basically the only reason why. I only ever learned about the cathedrals because apparently the rest well, I say I only learned about them, but for all I know, I could have been taught more about them and just not known because I was just so fixated on how fucking awesome the cathedrals were. Anyways, let us begin by talking about, the early English cathedrals. There aren't very many of them, but definitely the Salisbury Cathedral is probably the most well known because the spire on it is the tallest one in the United Kingdom. It's very large. It's very impressive. The Gothic architecture style, as you know, is very pointy and it's very angular based. It's just all about ornamentation, sorry. Whew. And, yeah, but early English stuff, I kind of find it a little bit more boring because there's not that much ornamentation on it. It's more straightforward. There's a central pier that's in the middle of it. The way the cathedrals are laid out, it's like a cross shape. You have your nave and your, I forget the rest of the words because I'm drunk. Okay, but anyways, yeah, Salisbury's a thing, it happened. Notre Dame de Paris is the most obvious thing. It's the giant cathedral of Notre Dame. It's French Gothic architecture. It's actually the first case of flying buttresses being used, which flying buttresses are those giant arches that you see that are outside the building, and they're basically supporting the building from caving in on itself, because when they were building this, it was getting built so tall that it started caving in on itself, and the architects were like, oh shit, this probably isn't a very good thing to happen. So they decided to come up with a really ornate way of supporting it. Not to mention the fact that the majority of the statues and stuff on it, which, by the way, gargoyles and shit, that's really cool, they used it as supporting fixtures for it. So whenever you look at this big building, it's like, oh my god, this thing's cool because Victor Hugo wrote about it with shit. That's because it's just really fascinating to think about all the history that went behind it. I'd like to also mention the fact that if you take into consideration that all these architects that worked on these works, like anything architectural that they worked on, they didn't live to see their works completed. They died while their stuff was being built. So the majority of the stuff you see, it's amazing to think that these artists had gone their whole lives creating these plans for these buildings, and then they never got to see it complete. If you take into consideration the fact that I M Pei can go out and build a building within, I don't know how long it takes to build a building, a couple of months, a couple of years, I don't fucking know. But regardless, the fact that he can build it, and then, ta-da, there's a building, and he gets to be able to say, I built this, that's pretty cool. We've come a long ways as a society. Because back in the old days, an architect basically had to understand the fact, okay, it's probably going to take over 100 years for this to be built, and I'm going to die because of the plague, you know? And, that's just really cool. So, yeah, Notre Dame is definitely one of the, I would consider them a middle Gothic. There's 3 different layers of it. It's the early Gothic with Salisbury, which there's not that much ornamentation. It's not really exactly boring because it's still pretty interesting to look at, especially with the central spire that's in it. There's the Middle Gothic, which is typically more of the French Gothic stuff because the French were like, oh, we really like this artwork, so they used it a lot. And then the third type is kind of the Neo-Gothic, and there's a technical term for it that I couldn't really remember, but they considered it flamboyant. And a good example of this is the Milan Cathedral, and if you look at it, it's freaking ridiculous. There are so many points on that building. It is stupid. Like, I can understand ornamentation, like Notre Dame, it's very beautiful looking because you can look at it and it's simple. It's like, there's a couple of statues right there, okay, that's cool, that looks really nice, I like the symmetry in it, it's really nice. You look at Milan and you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at because there's all these different little spots in it and I can't. There's like this big bronze statue, there's like a whole list of different monuments that you look at in it, like different statues that are considered like the must-sees of the Milan Cathedral, and it's like, oh my god, I can't even begin to go inside of this building because it looks like if I walk towards it, I'm going to die because it has so many pointy bits on it. Regardless, all three of these buildings have something in common. The whole concept of the Gothic architecture was a concept of light. Whenever you look at anything involving Gothic architecture, there's always stained glass windows, right? It's like the main thing that's associated with them. Whenever you look at them, the stained glass windows, they're very beautiful. They detail certain saints or parts of Jesus' life, which is really cool. But the concept behind that was letting light into the building, and it was the idea of being bathed in light and this transcendence that was present. And I mean, with the dome architecture of the Hagia Sophia, sure, there was light supporting the dome, but it wasn't the same kind of thing. The idea of walking into a Gothic cathedral was that you were walking into an area that, it basically became a little heaven on earth because of how beautiful it was. And, I mean, there's a cathedral in downtown Little Rock that's amazing. I've been inside of it. You walk through the doors and you walk inside, and it's like, it's so powerful to be cast in this beautiful, different colored light and walk between the pews and go up to the front. You turn around and there's an organ up there, and it's huge, and you're just like, oh my god, this is church, you know? But, it's really interesting, and, you know, it's also interesting to think the fact that Gothic architecture is named after the Gauls that came down from Germany into the general area and were like, hey, we really like these people, let's mingle with them. I don't remember exactly the history behind that, but I do know that the Gothic art style came from them specifically and basically integrated into the European and French style that was present. I also know that originally the ornateness, like obviously with Salisbury, it wasn't really a big thing. I mean, having the big central pyre was like a big thing because it was getting closer to God and all that other stuff. But with the later stuff, the ornateness, because places like Notre Dame were having this problem with crumbling buildings, it became a standard just for supporting, and it was one of the first instances that they tried to make the supports a very beautiful and ridiculously ornate thing. Like, I mean, obviously, because you get Milan eventually, and it's like, oh my god, I don't even know what I'm looking at because there's so many pointy bits, you know. And this was all precursor to like the Baroque style and stuff, because you know it's very ornate and flamboyant and very I don't know what other kind of words to say. You just know what I'm talking about. But regardless, this whole idea of transcendence within it, it's very different, and for a Christian or a Catholic during this time period, you think about it, nobody, like, the churches previous to this were, like, little wooden well, not huts, I'm being really general with this, but it was big buildings that had wooden roofs in it, and it wasn't that impressive, really. And then you look and you see the cathedrals, and it's like, yeah, I can understand why a bunch of these Catholics would go to these places to worship and stuff, because these places were built to be beautiful places of worship, you know? It's incredible to believe that humans could create such an ornate thing before use of cranes or anything modern technology. Of course, you know, that's part of their whole thing, is the fact that, okay, we gotta build this really big building and commission all this artwork and do all this stuff. And then once we do that, we will be so impressive that people will be drawn to us. And I mean, even today, one of the big things whenever you go to France, it's to see the Notre Dame de Paris, because it's so beautiful and it's so big, and you know, and it's been featured in so much literature, including Victor Hugo's Hunchback of Notre Dame. And you know, the fact that somebody could create such a building and die before it's even completed, and it still be mentioned in like so much pop culture and all this other stuff. It's remarkable, and the fact that it's such a big part of our history, because I guarantee you don't even have to be an art historian and you will know what Notre Dame Cathedral is because you've seen it in so much stuff, and it's just incredible to me. And you know, nobody really knows the basis of Gothic architecture, mainly because modern culture decided to kind of fuck it up. But that's okay, because that just kind of happens. We adapt to words and we fix it to our own ways and stuff. I'm not saying that I'm against Gothic culture. That's kind of its own little thing in the 80s that happened and kind of like went out of control. But it's in no way in shape part related to Gothic architecture, because the whole concept of Gothic architecture is light and God and transcendence and all this other stuff, and it is definitely not the same shit that the Goths in the 80s were definitely fucking looking at. I'm sorry, Susie Sue did not give a shit about Gothic architecture, just saying. But yeah, it was about light, and it was about being open, and it was a place that a lot of people felt comfortable with. That's that.
This program was produced by Pearson Media Group. PMG is a diverse group of individuals dedicated to perfecting their respective crafts through collaborative projects.